All right, hello everyone. People are still joining and we've got a waiting room set up for today, and Liza will be helping me admit people. But welcome. Many of you are regular members and attendees of this working group, but we've opened this meeting up to a wider audience, and so there's some people joining today that are normally not with us. So before we get started, I'm going to give a brief few-minute overview of this working group, what we're doing, and then we have a few guest speakers for today, or not guest speakers, but special speakers from our membership. And yeah, so with that, I'm going to get started. So my name is Colton Fagundis, for those of you that do not know me, and I apologize for the background noise. That's the sound of people joining. I'm not sure how to, if there's a way for me to turn it off. I'm with American Sustainable Business Network, where I'm policy manager and lead this Regenerative Agriculture and Justice working group. And so again, for those of you that are new to joining us today, the Regen Ag and Justice working group launched about a little over a year ago now, and we're bringing together a cross-sector of businesses and advocacy organizations to collaborate on policy to advance regenerative agriculture in a more just and sustainable food system. And here's a example of a lot of our members. Not everyone is on here. I actually need to update the slide, but you can get an idea of some of the people that we're working with. You know, I won't go into this deeply, but here's an overview, sort of the issues that we're working on and our goals. Very related to this, early on in our process, we established collective principles to guide our policy recommendations. And I'll send that out in the follow-up to this meeting to those of you that are new to this this discussion. And if for those of you that are interested in getting more involved in the group, that's one of our first steps for joining the working group, is to agree to our collectively established principles. And so this special series that we have invited everyone to, as mentioned in the email blast that you all received, is focused on getting us prepared, getting this working group prepared for establishing both our priorities for the Farm Bill and for our broader 2022 policy priorities. So Finian from Kiss the Ground, who will be joining us in a minute, will be going a little bit more into what the Farm Bill is. But for just a brief primer, I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but it is a omnibus piece of federal legislation that is passed every 5 years or so that authorizes the majority of agriculture-related policy in the United States. There's many opportunities within it to advance our goals of more regenerative and just agriculture and food systems. There's many things fighting against that that is passed regularly in the Farm Bill. There's both existing programs we can work within and opportunities for new programs and reforming existing programs to improve them. This is a smattering of examples of some various different marker bills that we have worked on, most of them related to the Farm Bill, some of them not. For example, the Protecting America's Children from Toxic Pesticides Act, which one of our speakers today, Jeannie, we'll be discussing, and that mostly actually has to do with EPA related regulations, but also does cross over into some Farm Bill related policies. I encourage, actually in the follow-up to this meeting, we'll send some more information and primers on the Farm Bill for those that are new to the discussion. So just a brief overview of our speakers for today. We will be having Finian Makepeace from Kiss the Ground will be our first speaker. Then we'll have Jessica Dillon from Green America, and then we will be having a Jeannie Economos from the Farm Workers Association of Florida. Again, this is a special series, so on January 13th, we will have a variety of other speakers that you can see there presenting on their Farm Bill related priorities, and then we'll be having another meeting that we're still putting together in February. And so far, you know, we have the Organic Trade Association lined up, and we'll have some others lined up. And those 3 meetings will be open to the wider public, just as this meeting is. But then moving forward, this group is generally closed to members. We do invite guests, but to become a full-fledged member of this working group that is required to become a voting member and participate in actually establishing our shared platforms and the policies that we work on and so forth. And if you're interested in becoming a full member of this working group, please reach out to me. Also, there will be follow-up and opportunity to get in touch then. So with that, I'm hoping Finian has joined us by now. Finian, could you announce yourself? Okay.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Finian, thanks. Liza's gonna put the spotlight on you, and with that, I'll let you get started. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Just one moment. Oh, stop share. Okay. All right.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks. Take it away, Finian.
All righty. Well, it's good to see everyone. I'm just going to take a quick view of the gallery here so I can see your faces. Good to see you all. Hi, hi, hi. This is awesome. I'm really glad and honored to be here. This is a group I think that has done incredible work. We've been involved whenever we can, whenever we're getting the time and the ability to, in a lot of the efforts that have happened, especially this summer into the fall. It was just incredible to work with so many of you on those strategies, on those fly-ins. And the success that's happened is more than just the security of that 27 billion, but it was more so, I think, some of the relationships that were happening that were allowing for what I'm going to be talking about today to feel more real, to feel more like it has a big shot because of kind of understanding and feeling the energy coming from staffers, coming from these offices, the heightened interest and capacity to be hearing about regenerative ag and the interest they have to actually move it forward at this point. So I just want to acknowledge this group and the folks who spent the time to develop those policy asks, to be on those meetings, to attend that is really huge. And it was an honor to partake with all you in that. So I'm going to be presenting Regenerate America is a campaign that Kiss the Ground is helping to convene and launch. So I'll be rolling through a deck. And Colton, how much time do I have if I can make sure I'm not going too much over?
Yeah, it's kind of flexible today. We're thinking 15 minutes or so for you, but if
perfect.
Okay, great, thanks.
Awesome. All right. Can I present? Is that okay? Let's see. Great.
Yes.
All right. So Regenerate America, an unprecedented grassroots campaign to ensure support for regenerative agriculture in the 2023 Farm Bill and beyond, with the tagline, "Soil is our common ground." Back after the film Kiss the Ground launched last September, at Kiss the Ground, we were experiencing and seeing the momentum, the tipping points that were reached in certain areas around awareness for soil health and regenerative agriculture, and the film's contribution to that, of kind of taking the massive amount of work that everyone on this call and so many others have been a huge part of, and really just heightening that, like I said before, that absorptive capacity to be talking about and engaging with regenerative agriculture. One of the key highlights last winter that kind of grounded us in the possibility of diving deeper into federal policy was witnessing the interest from the chairman of the House Ag Committee, David Scott, Rep. David Scott, him watching the film, getting really inspired about it, and then hosting that first hearing at the House Ag Committee in February, on February 25th, and inviting Gabe Brown to testify. And I got to work with Gabe Brown to prepare his testimony, and then having a trailer of Kiss the Ground, the movie, shown during that hearing was a great reminder of this kind of theory of change, that we have to start with the grassroots. We have to keep moving the momentum of the movement as a whole, but then there are opportunities for individuals and offices in government to really start to get this and feel included in this. So what we really were circling around last winter was, what can Kiss the Ground contribute to that utilizes our skills, our ability to storytell, communicate, raise awareness at high levels, bring people in, be the invitation into the regenerative ag and soil health movement, and combine that with so many of the amazing forces like ASBC, like the direct policy work with the groups who've been doing countless farm bills before, with the farmer groups and the kind of leaders on the front edge of soil health and regenerative agriculture, making sure they're included, and creating something that hasn't really happened before, where the attention on the farm bill is blasted out to the entire country, but also so many key districts and the people in them, but really giving attention and access for a lot of people to be involved inside this movement. So that was the genesis of this idea. And then this summer, sorry, I'm a little bit cold because I just came from outside rushing to get to this meeting. So pardon me, I'm actually shivering right now, just to let you know. My hands are freezing, so sorry about that. So we basically said, let's start meeting with the folks who've been doing this work. So starting in about June, this past June, we really started getting into with several organizations, companies, leading farm groups, farmers, and really diving into the policies of what would be the foundation, potential foundation of this campaign. So that's what we've been doing. And then we've been coalescing potential members for this coalition for the past month or two. So I'm going to go over this deck now. Regenerate America is a coalition-driven campaign strengthened by the diversity of members, including preeminent farmers, ag groups, brands, and influencers. We're really committed to this tagline that you saw, soil is our common ground. And what this means is that we're going to all have to work, especially Kiss the Ground, to ensure that we're spreading our wings and opening to bring in folks who we haven't always played with in the regen ag space, and making sure that they're there. And that goes on all spectrums. What we're really asking for is that this is a participatory campaign where folks feel like they are able to fully dive in and participate, not that they're just signing on to letters here and there, but they're actually being deeply involved. This is a kind of a reminder of the tone of some of this campaign, which you'll see on the right side here, is a nation that rebuilds its soils, rebuilds itself, really starting to bring people toward the attention of what's possible in rebuilding, what's possible when we are looking toward that in that regenerative context. Most of you, I think Colton did a great reminder in the top here, and we've all been kind of thinking about it. This is an historic opportunity, and most of us are pretty aware of how big the Farm Bill is and what it means and how much it does direct the majority of how farming goes in the United States, as well as our entire food system. That being said, the part that I want to remind folks on this call, many businesses and folks who are leading in business, is that a lot of us haven't touched the Farm Bill. We've been involved here and there.
That's right.
Oh, someone talked. I don't know. We've been involved here or there, but we haven't done a full deep engagement. And I think the opportunity that lies before us as coalition of folks who've worked together in this movement for so long is that when we come together, the strength that we have to contribute to the Farm Bill conversations is massive, especially if we have it in an umbrella that allows for certain key priorities to be front and center and constant. As I mentioned in the other slide, this is just another reminder of this is a new story to so many. This is an ancient story to so many others. And we want to be on the forefront of engaging with the concept of regeneration. We feel very, very sure that the message of regeneration has to be core at the table here. That yes, there's so many areas where we're trying to say this has to be conserved, that has to be conserved, but we want to bring and connect the leaders who are making these final decisions and have them believe in regeneration more than they ever have. Have them connect to the ancient indigenous wisdom that is regeneration. Have them connect to what's happening on farms in their district that is regeneration. Having them see it and believe it and get a sense that this is the world that we're all moving forward together. Why us as the convener? A lot of what the public and many of you maybe know Kiss the Ground for is being champions of the movement, working with many of the leaders and trying to make their voices more accessible to the general population in the world through things like film and graphics and communication and advocate engagement. A lot of what folks don't maybe know as much about is a lot of the work we've done over the last 9 years of bringing people in, getting key influencers, key brands, folks, and getting them engaged, connecting them to the right people. So we've always had that at our core of how do we bring people in, how do we get more people involved in this movement? And as a convener, that would still be our role, is making sure we're keeping the integrity of the leaders, but also inviting new folks to the table to make this a stronger, bigger coalition. This will be a farmer-centered campaign. We've committed to this campaign being farmer-centered, and what that means is, much like ASBC was doing for a lot of the fly-ins, ensuring that the farmer voice is at least a big part of that conversation whenever those conversations are happening. So both in the forward-facing component of this campaign, which is the media, the public awareness spreading, and on the insider track, which is the relationship building, the discussions with lawmakers, we're going to make sure that it's farmer-centered through and through, so that the voice of those who are really leading the charge and doing this work is represented, and those who want to do this work is represented. So sorry, I'm shivering because I'm cold. So I'm frustrated at myself for shivering right now. Pardon that. The campaign goals, we're looking at 3 separate sections here: public media, grassroots action, and policy development. This kind of gets into the world of what we're looking at in terms of participation. On the public media campaign, 1 billion impressions means just that's what the total reach has been. 100 million Americans advocating for Regenerate America. To put a context on this, this basically means some form of participation or other. This could be a signature, this could be a repost or an @ symbol someone puts on it. So it's pretty broad, but it's engaging in Regenerate America, the campaign. 100 influencers, this is really activating a pool of people who have large bases to activate and making sure that they're a big part of the campaign. Grassroots action, we're looking to get 1 million petition signatures in, especially those that are in key districts. So we're setting up for that success already. 10,000 letters or calls to elected officials. And this is really a big part of what we're looking at the farmer focused. Kind of the way we're looking at it is, again, this isn't an equation or any exact science, but we're trying to look at, like, one farmer call or letter could be equal to 100 what would be considered just constituents, or 50 just constituents calling in. So we're really trying to make sure we're representing the farmer voice and those type of things as much as we can. And then 100 farming and other organizations publicly endorsing the policy priorities that we're putting forth. The policy development, this is a lot of folks on this call we hope to be working with on this. This is cultivating those deeper relationships with 50+ members and their staffers. This is completing another 22 farm tours over the course of 2022. We've done several this last fall and late summer. I'll talk about those more in a minute. And then 8 to 10 champions. We're looking at having a bipartisan divide here, where we're getting key lawmakers to really step up and say that they believe in this and they think this is the way to go. This is a great quote from Eric Fuchs, who worked with the NRCS for 34 years and now is with the Soil Health Academy and Understanding Ag, just reminding us that the Farm Bill impacts more American lives than any other government program. The case study for farm tours. So we started before the campaign launch, which I'll talk more about in a minute on the timeline, which will happen in March. We have begun this late summer with farm tours, and the special design for these farm tours is that it's highly personalized, basically a deep education moment. The whole purpose of these farm tours right now is to really allow for these key aha moments on resiliency, on why functionality of the actual soil matters, how it works, giving these representatives key understanding. So the one that we're highlighting here today, we organized with Rep. Feenstra out of Iowa, and having him be able to take 2.5 hours with Ray Archuleta, who did the rainfall simulator. It took him through many places on that farm in Iowa, the farm host, and then having an NRCS official who attended with Feenstra. That's one example of one of the ones we've hosted so far, and we could send this group some of the pictures from other farm tours we've had during the fall. But the why we wanted to highlight this one is this is, for us, one of the most conservative districts in the country. Being able to have a representative who grew up in farm country, grew up farming, to have him have the aha moments that we're all hoping someone would have, really represents that as we rise this tide of awareness and pressure and public support for regenerative agriculture, are the representatives and or some of their staffers getting these key aha moments of they get it, even if they're still not voting yes yet, they still get it at their core. The working group, the working policy priorities. So some of you may or may not have been in touch with us so far to get a hold of the policy priorities that we've been working on. These are in draft mode. Like I mentioned before, starting back in June, we started connecting with key individuals and groups to develop these. It's about now 25 pages of priorities of legislation proposals that go along with the 6 priorities, which I'll mention in a second. But I just want to be really clear that those are still in draft form for the launch of the campaign in March. Those would be worked on and concentrated so that they're the most potent things are rising to the top that this coalition would get behind starting with the launch. So those are still very much in draft form. The intended outcomes for the policy priorities are regenerated soils, and we can send along documents that has this all in full. It's not just 1, 2, 3, 4. Each of those sections has subsections, as you could imagine. Regenerated soil, regenerated economics, regenerated communities, regenerated health. All of this stuff is in essence here to make sure we're advancing the widespread adoption of regenerative agriculture in the Farm Bill. The 6 priorities just kind of give a nutshell of what we're talking about here. Number 1 is expanding and refining, but expanding education, technical service, and implementation assistance. This is probably very widely agreed upon, especially in the regen ag space, that there's a lot of work to be done to make sure that how and in what capacity education and ongoing support is happening is actually helping for the very rapid advancement of regenerative agriculture adoption. So that refinement and expansion is a huge part of what's going to make this successful. Number 2, equitable opportunity and access to all USDA programs. This is essentially saying, in short, that what's been starting to happen at the USDA, while it's great, it by no means is the end or shouldn't be considered the end, and the stretching in that capacity to make sure that disenfranchised communities historically are being not just given equal access, but are actually going out of the way to make sure this is in the best way possible, that these limitations are being changed. Number 3, regional access to infrastructure, processing, and equipment. This is a very common theme that's happening all over the country right now, the recognition that the system as is right now is not allowing for many farmers who want to get into regenerative ag or soil health be able to do it. And it's also giving certain players a major advantage while others are getting squeezed out constantly. So both on the kind of antitrust side, but more so on the how is this change in this going to help both market access as well as access to being able to do this type of farming that we're proposing available for farmers. Number 4 is access to healthy and regionally sourced food. This is the big part around the SNAP program, which, as most of us know, is 75 to 80% of the Farm Bill funding. Really what we're looking at here is twofold. Number 1, are we making sure that humanity in the United States is getting access to healthy food, especially disadvantaged communities? Are they getting access to healthy food? That's huge. Regionally, is it being sourced regionally? The other side of this is the procurement side of this. Is it helping regenerative agriculture advancement or not? That's a huge leverage point that needs to be actualized so that the procurement process of SNAP is actually helping regional regenerative food systems. Number 5, farmland preservation and access for BIPOC women and beginner farmers. This is another twofold here where both the current trajectory right now of going toward absentee landowners in rural America, where land is not being managed by those who live in that region, and therefore stewardship is not happening quite as much, as well as international groups buying out land and this tendency to have no one who's working the land actually owning the land, and the legacy of a lot of farmland being taken out from those communities. So that's part of it. And also the very preservation of farmland itself, not having it be just all turned into neighborhoods or whatever it might be. And then the other side of that is significantly stretching the access for BIPOC women and beginner farmers. Are we making this a priority that the same guard that has been isn't going to be the future of farming? How are we going to make sure that that is radically elevated so that these farmers can have access? The last one is financing and oops, I was trying to move our faces out of the way here. Is financing adjustments and incentives through insurance, lending, and grants. This is really the world of, as we look at the issues at the Farm Bill, obviously things like crop insurance are just mammoths of problems. But the way around it in some ways is gonna have to be looking at adjustments in how lending and insurance and other grants as well, but mostly lending and insurance are adjusted so that those folks who are planning or doing adoption of regenerative agriculture are actually seeing the easy access to those funds, more so than folks who are just counting on the insurance bailout for farming very poor land, for example. So we're looking at the ways around that aren't just saying crop insurance has to go, end of story. So that's a bit we'd love to get into. Anybody who wants to see those priorities in full, like I mentioned, they're quite extensive right now. They'll be chopped down quite a bit for the final launch in March. Those who would join a working group would be able to participate in those. So speaking of that, just because we're on this last slide now, the process right now, we've had multiple partner meetings, potential partner meetings. For folks who are interested in this campaign, we very much want to have many or all of the folks or entire ASBC join this coalition, or however that might work. We don't want to make any assumptions of what can happen or how it can happen, but we've had an incredible experience working with everyone here in this working group so far, and feel like there's quite a bit of alignment and quite a bit of work, quite honestly, that out of recommendations that were happening through the working group here did and are in our priorities already, in some instances almost cut and paste verbatim. So a lot of the work that we've been doing collectively has made itself here already. So there's not, I don't think, many divergences whatsoever. So what I'm getting to is that there might be opportunities to have ASBC and others joining into this coalition. And I want to be very clear that we don't plan to have the only coalition whatsoever. That's not what we're trying to do here. We know that there'll be multiple other coalition forces with their own priorities heading toward the Farm Bill. What we do hope to have by the launch date in March is a list of priorities that are going under a major campaign push that multiple coalitions and groups will be able to see themselves in, being very clear that, yes, priority number 1 or 6, we are in that, we see that, that's very much exactly what we have been intending, or all of them. But that's really the hope, is that this is allowed to be an umbrella out front push that is getting attention and getting folks who are already in this or have been in this for years to say, yes, we're supporting Regenerative America while we still have our 30 priorities that we're going to be talking to your offices with. We also are endorsing this that you might have seen on this advertisement on the Super Bowl or something. Like, we want people to be able to see themselves in this as a part of this coalition while simultaneously bringing their own work forward, of course. So with that, I'll just say last thing is we have 4 working groups for the coalition: a media working group, a working group for grassroots mobilization, a working group for fundraising, and a working group for policy. And we'd love to have folks get involved and join And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. Anything I missed, Aisha or Aria?
Hi everyone, this is Aria. That was great, Finian. Even freezing cold, you did great. I think I've had the opportunity to help with some of the policy priority development behind the scenes, and I just wanted to underscore that this is not in any way just one organization's policy priorities. It really is the listening to and aggregation of a lot of different expert organizations and producers who are directly sort of saying, these are our priorities. And I think what I'm seeing both for myself, for LandCorp as a soil health nonprofit organization, but also from a pretty wide range of organizations, folks are getting excited to be a part of it because it's an opportunity to have your passion project or your number one priority be amplified by this campaign, and to reach not just our friends in food and farming and the environment, but kind of connect with America in a new way on this issue, on these sort of collective issues. So it's an exciting complementary campaign in the space.
Thank you. And I just saw Dave's here too. Dave, anything I left out? Dave's been helping us work on this as well. Dave Murphy.
No, listen, I think you did a great job, Penny, and again, really excited to be here as well. I do think it's really important to focus on trying to build the bipartisan support. So it was great to see Congressman Feenstra get so excited about soil health. It's very hard sometimes to have hope in Iowa, but I do find hope when you can get a Republican congressman excited about soil health. So
thanks for helping set that meeting up. Thank you, Colton, for having us. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for the great presentation. We'll keep things moving along. So passing it over to Jessica from Green America. Why don't you introduce yourself, Jessica, and take it away, and just keeping time in mind. We've got 25 minutes left, and Jeannie is going to present as well, and hopefully we'll have time for Q&A, and if not, then we'll figure it out then. Thanks.
I promise my portion of this is far less formal and well thought out than what Finian just walked us through. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jessica Hulse-Dillon. I'm the Director of Network Engagement for the Soil and Climate Alliance, which is one of these coalitions, engaging with coalitions that Finian mentioned. We are a supply chain based working group focused on how do we convert the food and ag acres in North America into regenerative practices, with the triple bottom line goal of restoring our climate health, reviving the climate, and doing all of that while ensuring the success and survival of family farmers. I am also a 4th generation small grains farmer in my free time. So this is quite near and dear to me. And we are, thank you so much to Colton and the ASBC team for inviting us to join and to share a little bit about what we're thinking. The federal policy space is a bit new for us. I did it in a previous life, and now the network is really coming along, and we're excited to engage with you all on a number of collective priorities that we see as absolutely vital to allowing us to reach that goal of, transitioning land into the regenerative practices, as well as we are very, very excited to be one of the members of Regenerate America, and so grateful to Finian and Aria and Aisha and the team at LandCorp and the team at Kiss the Ground, who are all bringing this to fruition. And it's going to be a really exciting, just less than 2 years, hopefully, until we pass this. So just to walk you all through where our priorities lie, we both starting broadly and then going a bit narrow, we want to change the way people talk about agriculture in this country. We want agriculture to be understood as this all-encompassing system that affects not only the farmers that are growing the land, not only the people in the rural communities, but also the consumers who are consuming these products, who are making choices every day about what they can and can't afford, what they can and can't feed themselves and their family. So what we really want to boil down to, and Dave, I really loved your comments about we need to bring Democrats and Republicans along. This is not a partisan issue. This is food, this is land, this is security for all of us. So we want to look at ways to ensure that regenerative agriculture is understood as a multi-practice biological transformation. There is no one way. you don't have to check all the boxes to be regenerative, but it's about how you transform your system and how you do it in a way that's benefiting all of the players involved. So really looking at, and we don't know the answer to this, this is where we need your brilliance, is how do we build something like that into the Farm Bill, into something that has to be measurable and verifiable and still accessible for farmers? Because again, it all comes down to, if the farmers won't do it, it's not going to work. So really thinking about that. And we work with, I've over the years worked with 200-300 farmers who have transitioned on their own. So we've got some ideas, but we want to really vet those and really look at how we do that. And then really diving into some of the specifics, assuming we can bring this, some of this language into the Farm Bill. And we're already seeing some really exciting uptakes with the marker bills that Colton mentioned. We've been working with Congresswoman Spanberger's office on some language in her bills, and so we're feeling really positive there. But then two very specific tactics that we see as absolutely key in moving this forward is what the first being what is part of the Regenerate America's Priority 1 and 2 is really looking at the funding around technical assistance, technical support for farmers, knowing that farming practice is a culture. It's not just a practice. And we need to have the local resources for farmers to reach out, because it's so difficult to do it in a vacuum. We have a great farmer down in Arkansas. The man is 6'7" and he's massive. When he switched to regenerative, he was physically thrown out of the coffee shop in town because it's such a cultural issue there, and he was doing something different. So we really want to look at, how do we shift that culture? How do we bring experts into these communities, or just retrain the NRCS and other experts that were already there around regenerative practices, around what it takes. And in some cases, it takes not doing something different. So really looking at that, and not having them listen to us. Again, we're not the experts, but listening to Nicole Masters, Liz Haney, the team at Understanding Ag, Will Harris, Gabe Brown, all of these brilliant experts that are out there and can come in and do this. And we've been looking at, there's existing programs, there's places to build from here, from ag communities. Pennsylvania's got an organic consultant program that is just taken off. So there's a lot of places for us to build there and to take lessons learned and to bring those into practice. And then the second piece, and I know anyone who's talked to farmers has heard this time and time again, crop insurance, crop insurance, crop insurance. We know. But again, echoing what Finian said and what others have said, we don't just want to break it. We don't just want to throw it out. We want to reform it. We want to fix it and make it usable and make it a tool that is serving, again, farmers, always with farmers in mind, but also the broader ag system. So really look at, how could crop insurance be turned into more of a yield protection for transitioning farmers to support them through those transition years off of the conventional system. Some folks say that it takes a year or two, some say it takes 4 or 5. It's going to depend on the farm, it's going to depend on a lot of things. But could we build it in as something that is going to help that transition, and then maybe farmers use it as in the absolute worst case scenario, but it's not, oh, it's okay every year if my crops fail because I've got my crop insurance. Really build this as a way so that it is a absolutely emergencies only, not a, hey, I've got a line item on my books every year where my crop insurance comes in, and that's great. And those are the two really, really big pieces that we have heard throughout the years I've been working with the network. And underlying all of that is, of course, making these programs accessible to all farmers, to all folk, new farmers, young farmers, farmers of color, female farmers, really in short, because that's how we build the successful next generation in agriculture, is making sure that it's incredibly inclusive, it's incredibly accessible for everyone. So short and sweet, that's where we're going. Really excited to work with you all on moving this all forward. And back to you, Colton.
Thank you, Jessica. Before I pass it over to Jeannie, just as a brief transition, one thing I should have mentioned at the beginning, and something I'm still getting used to, we are no longer ASBC, we are ASBN, American Sustainable Business Network. It's a part of a merger we've had with Social Venture Circle. and just putting that out there. It's transition phase as we're all getting used to the new name. But also just more into the content part of it. Very much appreciate both of you going into some top line Farm Bill priorities there, and the broad overview of Regenerate America. And I think, you know, it's and I appreciate at the end Aria and Finian talking about thinking about how we can work together and how there's multiple coalitions. And so this is a coalition here that is bringing its own perspective and priorities as we're establishing them, and Regenerate America is taking a very broad approach. And so we want to be constantly thinking through how we can bring value added to each other's work that we're doing, and recognizing that, you know, all the work that we're doing is important. We all have our roles to play, but overlapping and combining power whenever we can to make stuff happen is important. So as I pass it over to Jeannie, well, Jeannie's going to take us in a little different direction, bring a different perspective, and I won't spoil it too much, but she comes from working very much on the ground directly with farm workers. So it's going to bring a justice perspective, and the importance of justice and the importance of addressing farm workers' rights and justice overall for this transition to regenerative agriculture. She's going to discuss agroecology, which is a parallel movement and approach to regenerative agriculture, which has some slight differences, but is just as equally important to the work that we're all doing here. And also, she's going to talk about some priorities that lie outside of the jurisdiction of the Farm Bill, because as we're all working on the Farm Bill, which is very important, we also need to keep in mind that there are other opportunities out there, and we will be sort of parallel establishing those policy priorities in this working group. So Jeannie, pass it over to you. I know we're running short on time, but please feel free to take it to the end, to the hour. Take as much time as you need. And then if people are able to stay on for Q&A after, we can do that. As always, we're trying to fit in too much in this hour. So Jeannie, please take it away. I'm going to share your slides that you have here. Just one moment.
Thank you very much, Colton. I really appreciate that. We really appreciate being invited to speak here today. This is a little bit of a different direction. I want to start out by saying that we've been talking about farms and regenerative farming, but the reality is that in most cases, there would be no farms if there were not farm workers, farm laborers to work on those farms. And so what we want to talk about today is farm workers, food sovereignty, agroecology, and social justice in our entire agricultural system, because it's injustice in our agricultural system that's contributed to where we are today in our agricultural system. The key point I want to get across today, depending on how much time we have for the whole presentation, but the key message today, if you get nothing else out of my talk today, is that grassroots communities need to be part of the decision-making process. So the people that are most affected by our agricultural policies and priorities are the people at the grassroots, and they need to be consulted and build relationships with them so that they are part of the decision-making process. So next slide, please. Yeah, thanks. So who are farm workers? Well, we found during the pandemic that farm workers are the essential workers, but guess what? They've been essential workers for hundreds of years. They're providing the food that feeds America because they are the ones that are doing the labor in the farm fields. And they are often food insecure, even though they're harvesting the food that feeds the rest of us. They have low wages, discrimination, intimidation, exposure to pesticides and other agricultural chemicals. They are also excluded. A lot of people don't realize this. They are excluded from most labor laws in the United States. Farm workers and domestic workers were deliberately excluded from labor laws. And this is a legacy of slavery that holds over today in our agricultural system and for domestic workers. So what we say is that farm workers are really transplanted farmers. We work with Black, Haitian, and Hispanic farm workers. the Haitians and the Hispanic farm workers generally come from El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Haiti and Mexico. And most of them worked on farms in rural communities in their home countries. So they come to this country because of different migration needs, but they come bringing ancestral knowledge, skills, and expertise of doing regenerative agriculture in their home countries just naturally without having the term organic or sustainable or regenerative. Although that's changing now because the big pesticide companies are trying to get a foothold in rural communities in Central and South America. So farm workers, or many of them, are the victims of our immigration and agricultural system, international trade agreements. We have a very schizophrenic agricultural or immigration policy in this country. When we need workers in this country, we look the other way. We don't see undocumented workers because we need their labor. But then when we want, then when our priorities shift, then all of a sudden they're undocumented or quote unquote illegal workers, and we want to send them back home. So it's really important to understand the discrimination and exploitation of people and land and agricultural systems that are an integral part of our agricultural system. So peasant and indigenous and Bipoc communities in their home countries are most vulnerable to climate change, which they do not contribute to. And that also is a driver for migration, which also exacerbates the problem. So next slide, thanks. And so farm workers also, they're doing some of the hardest work in our country. It's also, agriculture is one of the most hazardous occupations in the United States. So farm workers are 20.9% of every 100,000 workers, compared to the average of all industries of 3.9 workers, have a death rate of agricultural hazards. And according to a NIOSH study, the pesticide poisoning rate is 39 times higher than found in all other industries. So in order to get food to our tables, farm workers are risking their health every day. And so policy priorities need to consider how our agricultural system is not only affecting our soil health, and people think about their own health when they think about buying organic and sustainable food and wanting to have a good agricultural system, but the workers, every single day, the workers are putting their health and their lives at risk on conventional farms where they are exposed to pesticides, chemical fertilizers, and other kinds of incidents. So next slide, please. So in thinking about these policies, we need to recognize that according to the EPA, and I think this number has risen since then, 900 million pounds of pesticides applied annually in conventional agriculture in the United States. This emphasizes the need for regenerative agriculture because, as we know, those pesticides strip the soils of their nutrients, which makes them less able to sequester carbon, which then, of course, contributes to climate change. So we need to think about our pesticide policies in addition to farm bill policies, because as long as we have big agribusiness that are continuing to promote GMO seeds, and pesticides, we're going to continue having these problems with our soils. There's anywhere from 1.5 to 2 million farm workers in the United States and about 2 million farm worker children, according to the National Agricultural Workers Survey. And I say that about children because even though children may not, some children do work in the fields alongside their parents because parents need extra money because their wages are so low. But also children become exposed to pesticides. So you can see in this picture, farm workers are eating in the fields before having a chance to wash their hands. So there's pesticide residues on their clothes, on their hands, they're ingesting it. And then when they go home, those residues are taken home into their homes, and they can often affect the children of farm workers. So next slide. So even though it's not part of the farm bill, thinking about pesticides is really critical to regenerative agriculture. Right now, so we're talking about environmental racism and climate justice. Folks heard last summer about all the extreme weather events, including the fires and deaths from heat, including farm worker deaths from heat exposure. Right now, the Farm Worker Association has a big campaign to try and get heat stress regulations passed at the national and state level. Heat is the largest weather-related killer in the United States in the past 30 years. That's expected to get worse. Farm workers die at heat stroke at 20 times that of other workers, and they die from pesticide exposure at 39 times that of other workers in other industries. Your core body temperature, it's one thing to be exposed to high temperatures, but then when you're doing hard physical labor, then your core body temperature raises, your physical exertion increases your body heat. So heat exhaustion from heat exposure and loss of fluids and salts such as due to sweating are a real risk for farm workers. And not all heat exposure has acute symptoms. Sometimes there are long-term symptoms like kidney failure from chronic dehydration. On the West Coast with the wildfires, farm workers were wearing masks both because of COVID and wildfires, and of course that just increases their heat. And you can see in this picture the pesticide applicator is wearing a full bodysuit. This is Florida. I'm from Florida. Can you imagine wearing that full bodysuit in hot, humid climates, trying to protect yourself, but at the same time, being exposed to higher heat because of what you're having to wear. So one of the things that we're really concerned about is the compounding effects of exposure to both heat and pesticides at the same time. There's just beginning research on this. We found that heat can affect pregnant women and reproductive health from pesticide exposure. So right now there are some studies looking at how being exposed to pesticides and heat at the same time can compound both of those health issues for farm workers. So next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about food security because everybody's talking about food security and food stamps or SNAP benefits in the Farm Bill are a big deal because we're talking about food security. So food security means that people have access to adequate amounts of nutritious and safe and culturally appropriate foods grown in a sustainable and socially just manner, and that the people who produce our food are able to earn a decent and living wage, growing, catching, producing, and transporting, retailing, and serving our food. And access to a healthy food supply is important. But since we're running out of time here, so I'm going to go really quickly. You can go to the next slide. At the Farm Worker Association, we don't talk about food security. We talk about food sovereignty. And this goes to the key point in the beginning slide. Grassroots communities, subsistence communities need to have the right to decide their own food systems and have access their access to land so that they can grow food in their own traditional ways. So food sovereignty is not just about people having food to eat, it's about people having the right to define their own agricultural systems. And it entails the primacy of people's and communities' rights to food and food production over markets and trade concerns. This is really fundamental. And I think if nothing else comes through, Farm Bill policies need to think about food sovereignty and not just giving people food stamps, although we support food stamps for people because farm workers have such poor wages. Next slide. Hopefully we can get through some of this quickly. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but hopefully we can share the slideshow later with folks, because I think it's really important for people to realize what the elements of food sovereignty include, including access to land, domestic and local markets. And we'll go ahead and skip to the next couple of slides so we can get to some of our policy priorities. You can go to the next one as well. Yeah, so just very quickly, food sovereignty is the liberty and capacity to produce and consume culturally significant foods that were produced justly and without toxic chemicals. It's also about people and communities having power over their own food systems, and that includes access to land and the idea of land reparations. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are some of our policy priorities. We support the Asunción Valdivia Heat Illness and Fatality Prevention Act to protect all farm workers and all workers from heat stress. The PACTPA, or Protect America's Children from Toxic Pesticide Acts, that has been introduced into the House. This is really key. It would completely transform the way that we are registering and using chemical pesticides in agriculture and just in general in this country. It's a really key act. It's very comprehensive and we support it. We also support the Justice for Black Farmers Act because many of our Black former farm workers were indentured servants or sharecroppers whose parents were slaves, and they need justice. Many of them were farmers, so we support justice for Black farmers and reparations for Black farmers as well. The Environmental Justice for All Act, Senator Booker's Act, we definitely support that. You can read more about it. Comprehensive immigration reform. You don't think about that when you think about regenerative agriculture, but it is key. We have some 11 to 12 million undocumented workers in this country. Many of them have the potential to be small farmers and ranchers. They need a pathway to citizenship so they can have legal standing, so they can speak out without being afraid of retaliation or deportation. They need access to these government programs because if you're undocumented, you don't have access to them. Example, 12 million undocumented workers who don't have access to food stamps because they're undocumented. That is food insecurity and lack of food sovereignty. So next slide, very quickly. Thanks for staying with me and listening. So around the Farm Bill and other priorities in the Farm Bill, we support not only expansion of SNAP or food stamps, but we support them for undocumented people as well, because families are going hungry, especially people that are actually working in our fields and growing our food are still going hungry because they don't have access to food stamps. We support the Minority and Women Ranchers and Farmers funding. We support the Campaign for Young Farmers and Ranchers, the Climate Stewardship Act, Agricultural Resilience Act. But next slide, sorry, I'm going so fast, but I want to get a lot of stuff in. The key takeaways here, and there are other policy priorities too, and this group is working on many policy priorities, but if you get nothing else out of this talk at all, in all of our campaigns, all of this work around regenerative agriculture, it's tremendously good work. It's vitally important. It's critical to our climate and to our agricultural system. But if we are leaving out BIPOC communities, if we are not letting them be the decision makers in these policies, if we are not building relationships with them, not just inviting them into our spaces, but going to their spaces, building relationships, that's key. Too often researchers, academics, lawmakers, business leaders have said, oh, we have this project or this program, and we invite you to our program. That is not sufficient. We need to allow them to have the space to build their programs and go to their programs and be in relationship with them. So there can only be environmental, social, and worker justice when we have total inclusion. And next slide, just a couple of very quick last slides. I want to show some great pictures. So the Farm Worker Association of Florida, as part of this empowerment for social justice, for agroecology, and for food sovereignty, we have 5 offices in the state of Florida, and 4 of our offices have grassroots community gardens where we grow food while building communities. And we're centering grassroots BIPOC communities as decision makers in our community gardens. And there's some great pictures there. And just one last slide. These are children in our community garden, and the sign that they're holding says, "Vamos a nuestros raíces." We are going back to our roots. And you can see this with the children here. It's also all about building the next generation and passing on this knowledge and support and opportunities and access to the next generation. I could go on, but I'll stop there since we're at time. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Happy to ask questions. Please feel free to contact me at any time, but please think about including social justice and centering people of color in all of this work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. It's always a pleasure. So we are definitely past the hour here. Thank you for those that have stuck around. With that, so I think let's go a little over if our speakers are okay with answering any questions. Finian, Jessica, Jeannie, do you have a few minutes just in case there's burning questions from the audience, or do you need to run?
I'm okay.
I've got 10 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
Ian had to jump already. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, we have other Kiss the Ground staff on that can maybe help. But yeah, we're down to about half our original participants. But yeah, questions from the audience, please jump in. You could raise your hand. That might help us identify who has questions. Or we could just wrap it up. All right.
I saw there was a question about.
Yeah,
Yeah, please take it.
cool. Yeah. I'm just curious about the biggest action steps that we can take, either as an individual or as an organization. What are like the top, most precedent action steps that we can be taking?
Someone want to take that?
Yeah, I can jump in really quickly because we were just having this conversation internally. I really see us as at a really interesting moment because so many groups and so many individuals were activated in the last 4, 5, 6 years to really reach out to Congress and remember that, you know, they do listen to what folks are saying. They do look at their call sheets. They do look at the texts and the letters. So with the marker bills that are coming up and, you know, pieces of legislation and action that'll be moving forward next year, be vocal about them. Let's let them know that this is, you know, the Farm Bill is not going to be just an easy piece to get through, that we're looking for big changes. And I think we're in a really great position to move that forward. So just essentially keep doing what you've been doing and be vocal and engaged. And I think it'll build a really great platform rolling into Farm Bill.
Yeah, I can tag on to that just briefly. You know, a big part of what Kiss the Ground does is this training of soil advocates. So not only the important part of it communicating with your representatives, but also just with your local community. There's so much that can happen. There are existing organizations, but just bringing people in to learn more about it. I mean, the Farm Bill impacts so many of us, but just in general, our food system is, you know, we all have to eat, right? So regardless of where you're at, and it just be more educated about where your food is coming from, how it's getting to you, the whole process is a big part of the work that can be done on an individual level in terms of sharing with your local communities.
I was on mute. I'm gonna pass it over to Vivek. George, you have a question?
Yeah, hey guys, thanks for this amazing presentation. My question is sort of similar to the previous one, but you know, like I'm in the process of developing a worker-owned cooperative, multi-stakeholder cooperative in the grocery space, grocery household goods space. But like anybody who lives in the U.S., you know, obviously our traditional capital system keeps us like obviously very, very busy every day, weekends also. And so sometimes I listen to these presentations and I feel like I want to do something, I want to be involved. And I am like always feeling like I don't have enough time and don't know how to get involved. One suggestion I heard, and maybe someone could further elaborate, is like, how does one get like involved, whether it's in regenerative work or something else related on a local level, like, you know, and do it in a way that perhaps would fit into like a normal person's day-to-day schedule or week-to-week schedule. Yeah, that would be just, how to get involved locally, because that seems like probably a reasonable place to start for any of us who are not doing this kind of activism on a regular basis.
Hey, I can jump in again. I may be restarting what I just mentioned. Yeah, so first, we do have a program at Kids the Ground, the Soil Advocate Training Program. It's a great way that it's an evergreen course you can take at your own pace just to learn more. And there's a bunch of resources in there in terms of what you can do. And a big part of the course is helping you build up a project of your own that you can either have a community-based focus, or there's various other ways of approaching that. But there's a lot of support through that education system. But just some general examples that come to mind from having talked to people who have gone through it recently. One woman went and she looked at, here in California, the Healthy Soils Initiative program that was launched recently. And she just looked at the farmers in her region and she reached out to them and asked them if they had applied for it, if they've been approved for it, if they didn't, what were the hardships in getting that and what were they going to be doing next. And she has a full-time job. She really just did this on her own time just to get a better understanding of what the barriers in her local region were for farmers. And from there, she's working on seeing how she can help them. She's clearly in the early phase, but just that kind of deep connection outreach to producers in your region, I think, is a great place to start.
Yeah,
I love that, Aisha. I mean, the other one is, if you have the resource and the ability, is buy from those local farmers. I worked in food access for a long time. If you have access to farmers markets, if you can afford to shop there, or, figure out what you can afford to get the markets. Winter's great, at least on the East Coast. Everybody's got onions, potatoes, and squash. They're pretty cheap. But also looking into farmers markets, a lot of them have match programs and support programs to help stretch food dollars. And if your farmers markets don't do that, you should encourage them, because there's a lot of federal money out there. And know your farmers. It's it's a small but big, but just know who's doing what. And we had a local farm that had a family health crisis, and a bunch of people went out and helped them harvest stuff so they could keep selling. And just knowing where you can help folks like that.
Sorry, what was that federal program you mentioned?
So it's if you ping me or drop your email in the chat or something, I can look it up. I'm completely blanking on the name of it. It's a friend of mine. There's a number of programs that will match federal dollars. So SNAP, WIC, senior dollars spent at farmers markets, and there's entire systems set up for it. And I'm gonna find the name, and I'm gonna find who's running it now, and I'm gonna send that to you. So
I think it's under GusNIP usually, right, Jessica? GusNIP.
Sorry, so you cut out for a sec.
I think it's under the GusNIP program at the federal level. The funding
is it now? Okay.
Double up bucks and all of those.
Yeah, double and
market match, etc.
Market match for fruit prescription. There's a big program in DC. There's a number of ones. So yeah, happy to help make some connections there. And you get all the little devices and things that make it work.
Please.
So
great, thanks. And Aria, did you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, I mean, I think for all of us as individuals, it's there are so many incredible organizations working in the space. And one of the things that I try to say to folks who are getting their feet wet and figuring out where they might get involved is just getting acquainted with those organizations and the style of work or change that they're doing, and getting an understanding of what your own personal theory of change is. Do you want to be involved in radical organizing? Do you want to be doing something behind the scenes with businesses that's maybe a little bit more conservative? Just sort of figuring out what your theory of change is, and which organizations sort of are doing that, and so that you can be supportive rather than reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, and I mentioned, or I would just give a quick plug or replug for what we're talking about with Regenerate America and the work that we do at ASBN around policy. Vivek, yeah, you're still on the call, but for everyone else, as we have these, a lot of organizations like ours and coalitions like ours are putting together opportunities to get in contact with your policymakers. And it's maybe not exactly what you're talking about acting locally, but it may be. And being a local and being able to get in contact with your policymakers on state, federal, and local levels to make requests for change towards regenerative and just agriculture can be extremely impactful. The more people we get making those asks can be very helpful. So we're past the 10-minute mark now, and I know Jessica has got to run if she didn't already. Oh, there you are. So I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks for those that stayed till the very end. So our next meeting will be January 13th. We'll be sending out notifications for that, and we have more speakers lined up that'll be going more into some specific policy priorities. So thank you, everybody. See you next time. And have a good afternoon.